This is Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit, and today's subject is going to be evidence. And the reason I'm using this as my subject today is because it's a word I know a little bit better than a word that somebody used in a friend of mine used in a comment yesterday in one of these videos, and he asked the question what my criteria is, and he's a college art professor, so I think he uses that word far more than I use it. I don't know if I've ever used it actually. So I had to look up the definition. I mean, I got a general sense of what the definition is, but it's always fun to look up the definition. And the definition of criterion, that was something I learned, is criterion is singular and criteria is plural. But anyway, principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided. So, I love the question. So it gives me something to think about. Actually gives me something to ponder that can provide maybe more clarity in what I'm doing. And the answer I gave him was, well, I used a quote from Yoda in Return of the Jedi when he's talking to Luke Skywalker about the Force. When Luke is trying to bring his X-Wing fighter out of the swamp, if you remember that scene. He says, my ally is the Force, and I said, my criterion is the Force. Anyway, just kind of made light of it in a way, but in another way, it's true in a sense. I ended my answer with saying something about just simply wanting to have fun. So what does this all have to do with evidence? It's because I have found for myself that the mind is something that looks for evidence. And it looks for evidence to support what it believes. And I think I've said in one of these videos that I'm not so interested in talking about what I believe that I already know, that I think that I already know. I'm more interested in finding out what I don't know that I know. So, I'm sure we're this past year especially, we've all found out how true that it is that the mind is something that loves to look for evidence to support what it believes is true. And that's all that I do with these two. I'm just sharing a little bit of what's in my belief system. There's nothing wrong with belief systems. We all have them. The only thing I can be 100% certain of is that I am. Everything else to me is a belief. So I think of, I might have even shared this in one of the videos. I had a science class where let's get something going with this painting. It's a little, let's see, I want to get something dark in here. I had shared about this science class talking about objectivity and subjectivity, and maybe that art is more objective than objective than science is, because science is basically using evidence that it finds based on the ability we have to perceive. And one of the examples I think it used was talking about Turner, the painter Turner, and I'm not going to get the period of time when he was alive, but he's the artist who has these dramatic paintings of light swirling around. And the reason that they were using him as an example in art for art being more objective and science being more subjective is they were talking about the artist taps into this other dimension. I'm not sure if that's the words they used, but I'll talk about it that way because those are the words that I know. And science, several years later, kind of caught up to what Turner was doing in his paintings and their understanding about how light travels through space, I think. If I remember this all correctly. I'm not a scientist, so. But the general point is that sometimes we can get closer to something when we step out of our beliefs, closer to the truth of something. Because what our mind is always doing is looking for evidence to support what it already believes, right? So I think if you look at mystery novels, I think whether it's Sherlock Holmes or whatever, the thing that makes them good at what they do is they're kind of stepping outside of what we believe about the crime. And I'll give you an example of how my mind kind of works with putting evidence together. So I like to find something to talk about, a subject to talk about. And last night, the word home came to me. But as I thought about it, I couldn't really come up with something just didn't have something to talk about. But that word showed up. And then I was thinking about this comment of criteria, or the question about criteria. And then because that's not a word that I use, I chose to use something that's more in alignment with the way that I speak, evidence. And so Mary Ann the other night, or I guess it wasn't just about Mary Ann, but the other night I talked about the pet door that we have, and we were in bed sleeping and we heard this commotion. We thought that maybe our cat brought in a mouse again. But it was definitely a much bigger commotion than that. The cat ran into the bed with its tail fluffed up, like she was scared of something. And Marion went out to look, see what it was, and she caught a glimpse of some animal running out of the pet door. So some animal came into our house. And so Marianne, for the last week, has been pondering the mystery of what that animal was. And, you know, it's fun for the mind to have something. It's not like we're going to accomplish anything by figuring out what the animal was, but it's fun. It's fun to find the evidence. And ultimately, I think that's what I ended my answer to the question. It was simply about having fun, because it brings it into more of an experience for me than maybe something I would get out of what my beliefs are. And I know that I wouldn't be doing these videos if I had a different criterion than fun. Because I personally know that that's not something that motivates me, is figuring out what other people think of what I'm doing. So the evidence from experience actually is coming from a different place, that I think, than the mind. Having fun is a easy to gather evidence for. You just feel it, right? So I don't know if you figured out yet that I'm working from a photo again. It's kind of fun for me. So I'm not sure I talked a whole lot about evidence, but maybe I did. I'll find out later when I listen back to this. And see if you can tune into your own personal experience and what's fun for you, and find the evidence for it in your painting. And have a good weekend. Get out your own brushes. and we'll see you on Monday.